Randy the Natural Couture.
I'm Stefan Bonner.
This is Canada Spider Grove.
I'm Cara Priesing. This is Brandon Truth Vera.
Hey, I'm Ariane Celeste.
Yeah, I'm Tucker Dunn.
I'm Forrest Griffin.
I am Fyodor. You are watching MMA Facts.
Coming to you from the Raw Vegas studios in Las Vegas, my name is Dave Farra, alongside Steve Cofield from Yahoo Sports. How you doing, man?
I am good.
It's good to have you here. Coming up this weekend, UFC 95. We're doing a special installment of MMA Fix right now, betting odds. And first thing that strikes me about this card is that, in my opinion, it's not that exciting. Agree or disagree?
I disagree. I actually think it's a really good card. Really good might be strong. It's an entertaining card. You have a lot of fights that are in that 5 to 10 range in terms of the ranking. So you have good matchups. It's going to make for good fights. I don't know. I think people get a little spoiled. When you start to have 21, 24 fight cards a year, everyone is not going to have Chuck Liddell or Brock Lesnar or, you know, whoever, Randy Couture, elite fighters. Every card can't have a title fight. So some of them are going to have to set up what comes up down the road. I thought the last card, the Ultimate Fight Night card, was a good card.
The first thing that struck me about UFC 95, though, is I said, if this one's not free on Spike TV, I'm probably not going to buy it on pay-per-view. You know, times are tough, people. You got to be careful with how you're spending your money. So let's break it down, though. Let's look at some of these odds. Give me your thoughts. First, on Nate Marquardt and Wilson Gouveia.
Good fight. And, you know, that fight, or that type of fight that's in that range, maybe both guys can kind of get themselves back in the mix for a title shot. Marquardt's already had a title shot against Silva. He didn't do that well. I think he froze up a little bit. I think he admits that now. But I think he's one of the most quick improving 185s in the world. Really well-rounded guy. Gouveia's new to the class. He just moved down a couple of fights ago. And a pretty well-rounded guy. So I think in terms of style matchup, you have two guys who can pretty much fight anywhere. I don't think it's going to be a disaster on the feet or one guy gets overwhelmed on the ground. So it's an even fight. Now, Marquardt's a strong favorite. I think he should be. I think he's ahead of Gouveia. I also think the Jackson factor has to be calculated in. That's Greg Jackson. Has to be calculated in these odds because you're seeing fight after fight in terms of game plan and then the execution of the game plan. Greg Jackson has it on a lot of the other coaches around MMA.
One of the things that strikes me about this fight immediately is that both fighters are very strong. I don't think either one's going to get thrown around the octagon. Both fighters, though, have the potential to do it to almost anyone in the middleweight division. Do you think the spread is fair? Nate Marquardt, minus 180, Wilson Gouveia, plus 150.
I think it's more than fair. I think Marquardt has to be favored. I think if it were too small, you'd have too much money on Marquardt. So remember, you know, with these betting odds, a lot of times, whether you think a fight is even or not, it's made for the public. They want two-way action. So Marquardt is a more public fighter. People have seen him. He's had a title fight against Anderson Silva. So this way it balances out. And it's right on the cusp of where I would bet Marquardt.
So you're saying Marquardt is your pick?
I would bet him. Any higher than this, if it starts going to minus 210, 220, 250, then I would back off. I like Gouveia. I don't think there's enough value at this price to take the dog shot.
Yeah, I agree. Both of us saying bet on Nate Marquardt if you're going to bet on that fight. The reason why, Nate Marquardt, like you said, very, very hard working, and he's quickly improving.
Big guy for the weight, too. And he actually, even though Gouveia is moving down, he actually may be bigger than Gouveia at this weight.
I agree. All right, moving along, we've got Demian Maia at minus 250. Chael Sonnen at plus 200. Chael Sonnen is coming over from the WEC, where he was definitely a contender. He had some hard-fought matches against Paulo Filho, maybe even though Paulo wasn't at the top of his game at that time. How do you think this spread is with Demian Maia at minus 250 and Chael Sonnen plus 200?
You know, I think it's a little big. And I'm not saying Sonnen's going to win the fight, but I think his confidence is back. I think he lost a little bit of it as a smaller guy at 205. He's had a lot of success at 85. And even a 90% or 85% or 80% Paulo Filho is still pretty impressive. And that's a guy who people were talking about as a #2 middleweight in the world. And he went out and he executed a really good game plan the last time out. Who knows? Paulo didn't make weight. He looked like he was going insane in the ring. But he got the job done, Sonnen did. My question is on the other side with Demian Maia, because we've seen him in fights and he's had decent competition. But, you know, to tie up Nate Quarry like a pretzel, you know, it's a win. But I don't think Quarry's a great guy on the ground. I think here's a guy who can actually go to the ground with him, not get destroyed on the ground in Chael Sonnen. And I think the other thing that's going to, you really call into question is, if someone can have good takedown defense against Demian Maia, can he dominate and win a fight on the feet? I don't know if he can. I don't know what we've seen from him so far. I think if Sonnen actually fights the same fight he did against Filho, stays outside, uses his jab, maybe goes for a takedown here and there, makes sure not to get top control too often, he has a shot to win. And those are pretty juicy odds. Now, that said, maybe Demian Maia is so good with the submissions, he will take him down and submit him very quickly. But I don't think that'll happen. I think Sonnen will be really aware of the takedown. He's a former high-level wrestler, you know, Olympic-level wrestler. So I think he'll do a good job.
I think you're touching on a key point there, and a lot of that has to do with the way Chael Sonnen comes into this fight, game planning. If he doesn't get excited, if he doesn't make mistakes because he's in the UFC and he's trying to prove something, if all of this big talk is really just talk saying, hey, I'm excited to get in there, but he executes a smart game plan when he actually does step into the octagon, I think he has a good chance to win this fight. And my pick, as far as betting odds go, take Chael Sonnen. Yours?
I'm going to go with Sonnen, and it could turn out that Maia rolls to a victory, and that'll only make his run towards a potential title shot, even more solidified. I don't know. I got to see him on the feet. I mean, you have to prove you're well-rounded, and he can take guys down, he can submit, but we'll see what he does on the feet.
The next fight of the night, according to UFC.com, at least today, it's listed as Dan Hardy being just before the main event, fighting Rory Marquardt. Do you think that's odd placement?
It's a little bit in terms of names, but there's a couple of factors. First of all, if you look at the breakdown of the card, on the main card, you may have some grapple fest, you may have some wrestling matches, and remember, we just went through an event a couple of events ago where we had lots of stalemates and judo battles and guys tied up against the cage. So maybe they want some guys who are going to throw, and Dan Hardy does throw. And keep in mind, I know we are so insular with everything American. This is a British fight, so Dan Hardy's a huge guy over there. Probably the second most known guy amongst British fighters, next to Michael Bisping. So they want to deliver for their audience. They're going to get to see it first, and then we get a tape delayed. My only issue, I guess, is I hope that one doesn't go too long. I hope some of the other fights don't go too long, because I do think the non-televised card actually has some really good matchups.
Moving along to the main event of the night, we have Joe Daddy Stevenson and Diego Sanchez. The line right now, as it sits, Joe Daddy Stevenson is plus 200, Diego Sanchez is minus 250. Do you think that line is fair based on the performance of these recent opponents?
You know what? I think it's a little big. There's a couple of questions going into the fight. Sanchez is dropping down. Always a question mark, always risky to lay 200, 250, 300 on a guy first fight at the new weight. We've seen it. Mike Swick was kind of lackluster. We've seen a lot of guys. Jason Lambert was a disaster when he dropped in weight. So there's a lot of guys over the last year or so who have tried to go down. That first fight, that first cut is tough. Based on opponents, Joe Daddy's actually had a better roster resume of opponents over the years. Now, you look back, Diego has beaten some really good guys. No embarrassment at all in losing to Koscheck and Fitch at 170. I think it should be a little closer. I think the reason for the odds might be the style matchup, which we can get into. I want to make one other point, too, about the interest in the card and how good this card is. I'm hearing a lot of people complaining about this being a main event. Listen, every main event is not going to be for a title belt. These are legitimately two top 6 fighters at 155 pounds, and it's going to turn out to be a good matchup. They're both guys who come from the Ultimate Fighter, so I have no problem with this as a main event. I think it is going to turn out to be a really good fight.
I think the reason why this doesn't seem like a main event, at least in my mind, is because Joe Daddy Stevenson has had 2 pretty definitive losses recently, but they were to Kenny Florian and BJ Penn, so you can't just shake him out as not a contender anymore. Right. He's definitely still up there in the top 5 in the UFC's lightweight division. Diego Sanchez, on the other hand, he's had a couple of wins recently. They haven't exactly been against top-level contenders. When he's dropping down a weight class, Diego Sanchez, he's got a fairly extensive wrestling background. Do you think that he's going to be able to effectively cut weight like a real wrestler is able to?
I warn people about it. I think he will not have a problem with it. He was a little puffy at 170 pounds. He's not really a tall guy. He's about 5'8". Now, Joe Daddy's even smaller. Joe Daddy's he's listed at 5'7". He's probably 5'5.5" or 5'6". So I don't think the cut for Sanchez will be an issue. I think the issue in this fight might be the size in terms of the height and the skill set. And that's why I would still make Sanchez a favorite. I just don't love it at 250. But I do think if Sanchez keeps it on the feet, and I think he can sprawl enough to keep it on the feet, we've seen Stevenson is kind of limited. I think his biggest issue is reach. When you're a shorter fighter, to get inside, you're going to have to take a lot of shots. And I think you're starting to see a new Diego Sanchez, even though, against Fioravanti and Bill Keaton, those aren't great opponents, but he showed new weapons. He put together combinations. He threw knees. He threw kicks. So I think his repertoire on the feet is going to provide some trouble for Joe Stevenson.
Yeah, Joe Daddy Stevenson, as you mentioned, reach is a big thing, but also he's had problems with the speed of Kenny Florian, and Diego Sanchez has showed that he's got very fast jabs, and as you mentioned, he can put combinations together. So do I think that Joe Daddy Stevenson is going to lose to Diego Sanchez because of some of those combined things with the speed and with the combinations and with the reach? Yes, I do. Do I love minus 250 for Diego Sanchez? No, but if I were going to bet the fight, I would have to say that Diego Sanchez would be the pick.
I think Sanchez is going to win. I don't know that I would grab the plus 200, plus 180, whatever the fight goes off at. So I'll go with Diego Sanchez as well.
UFC 95 is happening on Saturday, the 21st. It's going to be free on Spike TV. at 9 p.m. If you want to bet on the fights, you can go to MMAfix.com. You have a whole selection of different places to bet on the fights. Once again, MMAfix.com. Joining us in studio, we have Steve Cofield from Yahoo Sports and CageWriter.com, where we actually do a whole breakdown of all the fights, right?
Yep. All the fights are listed up there. Every single fight we make picks on. You get the odds on every single one of them. So you don't always have to bet the big fights. A lot of times you can make money on, fight number 2, fight number 5.
CageWriter.com. Steve Cofield, we appreciate you being here today.
Thanks.
I'm Dave Farra. Thanks for watching the MMA Fix.